Good evening, everybody. Thank you very much for coming this evening. I'd like first of all to thank the King Edward's for allowing us to use this hall. Very much appreciated. It's a beautiful space, and particularly a day like today when it's so hot. It's airy, and I hope we can have clear minds to think about what the issues we're discussing this evening. So my name is Bernard Little. I'm a councillor, and I'm the chair of this local area committee. Before I ask other councillors to introduce themselves, I want to hand over to the committee clerk to read out the meeting arrangements. Thank you.
Thank you. Please can I request that mobile telephones and other such equipment are switched to silent mode as to not disturb the conduct of the meeting. There is no fire test planned for today. If there is an emergency evacuation, please take instruction from the council staff present. The toilets are both men, female and disabled are back through the doors down the hallway opposite the lift. The meeting today is open to the public and will be streamed live for subsequent broadcast via the council's website. You should be aware that the council is a data controller under the Data Protection Act. Data collected during this webcast will be retained in accordance with the council's published policy. By entering the meeting room, you are consenting to being filmed and to the possible use of those images and sound recordings for webcasting. One final thing to mention, we have hearing loops available. If you would like to use one, please let us know. Thanks, Chair.
So can I please ask that members and officers around in the front of the room here introduce themselves this evening, starting with Tom.
Is this working? Yes. Okay. Good evening, everybody. My name is Councillor Tom Hunt, and I'm a Labour councillor who represents Walkley Ward.
Good evening, everybody. My name's Ben Curran. I'm a Labour councillor in Walkley.
Good evening, I'm Henry Nottage. I'm the newly elected Green Party councillor for Hillsborough Ward.
Good evening, my name's Ruth Mercereau and I'm the councillor for City Ward.
Good evening, I'm still catching my breath, but I'm Malachi, Green Councillor for Brumhill and Sharrow Vale.
Hi everyone, I'm Adeel Zahman, Community Services Manager for Central.
Everybody, my name is Councillor Anne Jardencio and I represent Brumhill and Sharrow Vale.
And I'm Councillor Douglas Johnson, City Ward. So evening everyone. Sorry for being a bit late too.
Hello, it's Brian Holmshaw, councillor for this very ward, Brumhill and Sharrow Vale. Lovely place we've got here today. Thank you for being able to source this one, Adeel.
Before we start, could I just make a request that people speak really clearly, because these microphones are not taking up, and it can be very, very difficult to hear people.
Right. Did you hear everybody's name here? Almost. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So we'll slow down a bit as well, so that get the echo. Yeah. Right. Thank you. Okay, I'll bear that in mind. So I want to explain.
So can I make a request? Can we make sure that everybody knows where the facilities are? For example, if you want to top up a water bottle or something like that. Could you please do that? I had to search for it a while to find it.
Sorry, I explained where the toilets were, but I'm not sure where there is a water fountain myself, actually.
So that's yes, yeah. But there is a proper water fountain in the dining room, which is directly under here. So if you need to fill up a water bottle, it's much better water in the water fountain.
Okay. So before we proceed with the agenda, I'd like to explain how this meeting will work. I need to make you aware that there's been an additional item added to the agenda, and is we've got a transport update from Matthew Reynolds, who's a transport officer, and we felt it was important that members got the public and residents here got an update before the meeting in September. We will then move to the item on the local area committee proposed spending. The area manager, Adeel, will firstly give a short presentation. Then there will be a discussion and members of the committee will be asked to agree the recommendations of the report. We will then have a number of updates on the agenda and will then break out into groups for 35 minutes, hence the tables here. And in those breakout groups, we're going to be looking at two questions. The first one is what can we do to increase engagement and consultation with the committees in the LAC area. I'm sure you're aware that the LAC area includes Hillsborough, Walkley, Central Sheffield and Broomhill and Sharrowvale. So that's 4 wards. The second question is what projects would you like the money to be spent on under each of the themes that Adeel will talk about. So, and after that we will have public questions and answers for 15 minutes. So first of all, are there any apologies for absence?
Chair, I've received apologies from Councillors George Linders-Hammond and Christine Gilligan.
Okay, thank you very much. So, item 3, exclusion of the public and press. There are, to my knowledge, no items that require exclusion of the public and the press. Item 4, do any members here wish to declare an interest in any of the items of the business on the agenda? No. Okay, thank you. Could we look then to turn to item 5, which is minutes of the previous meeting, which we have got here, and there are copies on the table. Should I go through each page? No. Okay. Are there any items? Appears not. Okay. So, and then we'll move to item 6. Are there any matters arising from this? We can do. Yes, yes.
Or accuracy. I was actually at that meeting in Gravel Group, and on transport and highways, I clearly remember that traffic calming, unless it was parking, came out very highly, but it somehow missed off those bullet points. It was high on all of the tables.
Right. Can that be adjusted, Adeel?
It's on all the flip charts.
Yeah.
It's just that when it says feedback or as follows, that was a high priority on every table as we went round and on the flip charts. But the others are there, but that's this one.
Right.
Oh, sorry, that's the one. Sorry?
This is going to stop.
It's not the final one, is it?
Yeah. Okay. Oh, traffic calming. Okay. Sorry.
We can add that on.
Yeah.
Second item arising.
I would like to raise in Walkley, that clearly whoever decided which streets to block off has never walked down or up the streets in their life. They've cut off access to many of the shops, and the shops at the moment have a streets grant to try and improve our shopping centre. They've also blocked or intend to block off access to the two churches, which are just outside the road, also the doctor's surgery, the pharmacy, the community centre as well. And as Vice Chair of Walkley Forum, I was asked, along with the Chair, to write a letter to whoever was responsible for this, to express all the views that have been given at various public meetings. Apparently, we've got to put up with it for 6 months, however inconvenient. And many people who
We've got traffic on the agenda.
do actually need...
Yeah. On item, we've got an additional item on the agenda. Matt Reynolds is going to give a presentation. At that point you can ask them. It'll be before 7. It will be before 7. Yes. Right. So I will now hand over to the area manager, Adeel, to give a short presentation. And after the presentation, it will be open for debate for members.
Thank you all for joining us this evening. Can everybody hear me okay? Can everybody hear me now? Right, thank you all for joining us this evening. My name is Adeel, I'm the Community Services Manager for the Central Local Area Committee. I'll keep my slides pretty brief. I think we've got a packed agenda and we've got some breakouts. So the first section of my slides will be around the projects that have been supported over the last 12 months since the local area committees have been in play, and also about the distribution of grants for the Queen's Jubilee celebrations. And the second part of my slides will be around the proposed spend that we've got following your engagement and feedback over the last 12 months. Next slide, please. So this slide is about what local area committees are. So for anybody that isn't aware or has just come to this meeting for the first time, the local area committees are a way for you to make a difference in your community by sharing your experiences, and that's positive and also improvements that you feel that we can do as a local authority, but also collaboratively working with our partners. It's also an opportunity for ourselves as a LAC and the Council to empower and enable local community groups and residents to provide self-help to their communities by linking them with other groups and partners. Next slide, please. Here are some sample projects that local councillors have supported in the central wards. So some of the pictures are around planters that have been put in Kelham Island. We've also, the City Ward councillors have supported a group called Mental Mate, who provide boxing activity to tackle mental health. And there's also been the bike pump track that's been put in Hillsborough, which is well used, and we've had really positive feedback from the local community. Next slide, please. On this slide, these are some of the projects that have been funded through the ward part over the last 12 months in each ward. So that's just a sample of the projects. I can circulate this after. I'm mindful it's quite small on screen. But we funded over £70,000 worth of projects across all 4 wards last year. And again, I can circulate these after today's meeting. Next slide, please. So this is around the Queen's Jubilee celebration. Each local area committee was awarded £6,000, which was given and distributed to local community groups and residents. I put some pictures on here, but also some quotes from people who attended these events. We had around 25 applications, and we supported about 95% of the groups. It was great to work with the groups because more than 70% of the groups were never in touch with the council, so it was the first time that they'd worked with Sheffield City Council, and we supported them. And some of the comments were quite moving, particularly the one from a resident called Ivy Richards. That was followed up in a phone call where the individual was quite emotional. So that's just some of the positive changes that we're trying to do out in the community. Next slide, please. So this is where we're up to currently. So we're now at a stage where we have to allocate the £100,000 in addition to the ward pots and SIL monies. And we've got 5 themes that have come via the engagement and consultation that we did last year. Of course, we will look at match funding opportunities where these do arise. And this is all following your input at the last meeting on the things you would like to see in your areas. You'll also have a further opportunity in today's session, once we get to the breakout, about sharing what future projects you would like to see. Next slide, please. So this slide is about transport and highways. Again, it's quite small on screen, but on your tables you will see an A3 sheet with a copy of the report, and you will see a section on each theme and the allocated funds. So for transport and highways, the committee, we've allocated £22,000, and potential projects could include community speed watch activities and additional vehicle activated signs. Next slide, please. This slide is about environment, so potential projects could include installing new litter bins, looking at working with local residents, looking at street art. But again, although the funds have been allocated, the ideas and suggestions that come from yourselves and people in the community is something that will evolve over time. Next slide, please. And this is for communities and neighbourhoods. So the allocation is around £36,000. Some of the projects that are on there are around cost of living, working to support health and well-being. And it's not something that we can do ourselves, so it's working with local residents, listening to your ideas, working with grassroots agencies, and looking at what we can do different. I won't go into too much detail. It is on your table, but we can share that after today's session as well. Next slide, please. And this is about community safety and crime. We've allocated £9,000 to this, but this is also in conjunction, so we will work with partners such as the Violence Reduction Unit, South Yorkshire Police, and local residents and community groups, and make sure that we can bring forward any ideas and projects that you feel that we can support. Next slide, please. This is around business employment and skills. So there's an allocation of £8,000 for this. Again, a lot of these projects are already in momentum, so local career fairs are taking place. We've had some local career fairs in the city centre. There's one coming up in the next couple of months at the Zest Centre in Walkley, but they are just some of the initiatives that we're working with Opportunity Sheffield and Business Sheffield to bring career fairs into the community to support employment opportunities, and that is something that has come back from the engagement that you've shared with us over the last 12 months. Next slide, please. So we're constantly evolving as a local area committee, and it's key that we keep the engagement and momentum going. That's at today's session, after today, whether it's by email, or if there's any sort of opportunities that you would like the LAC and the members to come into your wards, feel free to email us or to give us a call. Our contact details you can see, and we're happy to come into your local communities to share anything you feel that you may need. And I propose them recommendations to the committee today. Thank you.
Yes. Just want to flag out for the benefit. We haven't actually agreed those yet. I'm just saying we're not necessarily going to. They're not fixed. I don't think as rigid as that.
Yes, they've been asked for us to consider as members. Right, items. Are there any questions?
Can I just raise the issue on community safety? On the area plan, one of the priorities is to achieve this what's happening, particularly in London, that could be. I think that's really important. And there's 9,000 under there. I wonder if some of it could be targeted particularly to improving women's safety in the city. Because otherwise it'll just be spread very thinly across a big range of area, and I think it's really important. Thank you.
Adeel?
Thank you, Lord.
Thank you for that. In that particular question, we are working with a violence reduction unit, and there's some ongoing work at the Ponderosa, and we're working with various groups and also partners within the council to look at that, and that's where there's opportunities to match fund and look at collaborative working, but that is definitely something that has come through the engagement, and it is in the priorities and will be looked into.
In Upthorpe have been concerned about being on the Ponderosa by themselves or in small groups, so it really is an issue.
Thank you.
Right, I'd like to move to the next agenda item, item 7, but we're going to be talking about the cost of living. Can we therefore agree the recommendations of this report?
Well, no. I was going to propose that we don't, for the simple reason that the idea about this funding is meant to be delegated to the local area committee, which is the actual elected people here. And I was hoping that we could deal with this in the same way as the ward pots, for just the sort of reason you explained, that having a very centralised but prescriptive set of criteria isn't really very effective. We think actually it is important for councillors to have some say over the spending and for it to be more responsive. And also because things are different in different wards. And I know in my ward, in city wards, there's slightly different issues, to what's in Hillsborough and Broomhill. Not massively different. They'll fit within the rough approach of the overall LAC. That's a combination of all those. But they are slightly different. And we think it would actually be better delegated to the wards and to use the decision-making structure that's already in place for the ward groups, and that is essentially the same as the ward pot, but to split the money in that way. And just because otherwise it breaks down to ridiculous levels where you have quite small sums. So the example of £2,000 per ward for transport or highways improvements, you don't get very much of a transport highways improvement for £2,000. But actually, if you use the money in a more creative and strategic way, you can do better things, or at least the right things. So I'd rather that approach than a sort of tick box job by officers who aren't elected. So I'm just suggesting that we don't approve this, and instead we split it up in proportion to the ward spending, the ward pot spending that's been allocated, and use that decision-making process.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Lorraine Wood, and I'm Head of Communities in the Council. And Central LAC is one of my LACs. Douglas, no, this is £100,000 is for this local area committee. It needs to have a decision today by this committee. Either you all agree it or you don't agree it. And you can apply the ward pot process for the money. It is a process. It'll be by application, by groups, but the funding that is suggested, that was on Adeel's slides and suggested in this document, needs to have a decision as per the Constitution tonight. So Bernard needs to ask for a show of hands. Do you accept that this is the money and it'll go against these priorities? Obviously, with your ward pot, you can match fund. And you can have that discussion as a committee. This is just really tonight to make a decision on this paper to agree the spend against those priorities that have been decided by the public. So you need to make a decision tonight. And Bernard, as chair, you ask for a decision from your members.
Okay, Lorraine, I mean, I think I made the point that I'm proposing something different. I'm proposing we make a decision, but we allocate the money for decision-making in terms with the ward pot. I think, to be fair, the sort of tone of what you're saying is about officers calling the shots, but actually the money is being delegated to the local area committee. And it is important sometimes that local councils reflect their communities, and it's not just a centralised controlled by officers. So that's what I'm proposing, that we have that decision on that basis.
It's not controlled by officers at all. This is your money, and for the committee to decide how you've spent it. So I'm assuming that you've agreed the spend against these priorities. It is your decision as a committee on the spend of this money, and you've worked and engaged with everybody to identify the priorities, and that's your spend. The process for getting the money out and everything is different, and you can use the ward pot process. Absolutely you can, because that works for you. And you can use the area committee money to match fund any of your ward pot spend, because your ward priorities may be very similar to your area priorities. So the decision tonight is just you agree those priorities and the spend against those priorities as a committee.
Are you happy with that response, Douglas?
Well, no, I was just going to stick with what I said before. The point is that the net outcome will be much the same, but the point is that the decisions should be made by the ward councillors, as in the ward pot process, before being signed off, not just by some centralised officer. It's not criticism of the individual officers, but it should be the elected councillors who have say on each row of spending. So I was going to make the motion that we allocate the same money for the local area committee priorities, but delegate the decision-making on that to the elected members rather than the officers, and for it to be done in accordance with the ward pot decision-making. So I was moving that.
Apologies, Douglas, that's exactly what I meant. This is member decision. There is no officer decision on spend. It is as per the ward pot process. You as elected members of this committee will make the decision on spend when applications come in for spend. So that is exactly what I'm saying.
It's just that, the report that's been prepared by officers says that it'll be the officers making decisions, not the elected members. So if we can change that,
yes, of course you can. It's not an officer decision. It is an area committee, and you are elected members on that area committee.
Okay. It would be good if we get the paperwork right in future.
Angela, can you speak?
I just want to second what Douglas is proposing. So if we can change the wording. Sorry. I want to second what Douglas proposed. Where we changed, we make it clear that it's the members who make the decisions as in the word pots. So it's not officers deciding how the money is going to be spent in our wards.
I see Lorraine nodding with that. It seems we can reach the consensus. Malaki?
I think we just want to be transparent with the public and let them know that we were considering alternative ways of allocating those funds and maximising the most underutilised assets in the community. It wasn't about making a decision rather than portraying what we were thinking, and I think that's what transparency is. So we're just getting it across to you guys that there was another alternative option, but I'll pass it on to you.
Ben?
Yeah, no thanks. Can everyone hear me okay? Yeah, thanks. Certainly agree with the sort of ward pot methodology for allocation. What I would want to ensure is that we actually reflect the method, not just the process, but the method through which funds are allocated through ward pots, making sure that the indices of multiple deprivation are factored in and it's not just divided by 4, so that need is accounted for in that way. And I guess to echo sort of Douglas's and others' point about the officer decision, when we had the first meeting of this LAC, we had an awkward bit where we left the meeting to discuss some wording in a report that said about the decision being devolved to the manager in consultation with the chair. We changed that, and paragraph 1.3 has gone straight back to what officers originally put forward that councillors have amended. So what we input and a number of other LACs followed was that the decisions made by the manager, because constitutionally under the council it has to be for legal reasons, but that it was done in consultation with the committee. And what that actually meant was that Adeel could email us and say, hey, we've got this decision, rather than just having it on Bernard, could take the view of the committee and then take it. And so that's the form of words that was agreed previously, and that's the form of words I'd like to see reflected in 1.3 and future papers where we have this issue, so we don't have to debate it again and again to the poor people who have to come and...
Okay. Thank you very much.
Totally agree. It's a committee decision, and you as elected members are the committee, not the officers. The officers are the support network.
So we've reached consensus.
Sorry, I forgot to say my last thing. And just on the community safety point, could we just add Laura's as a point 3 of projects for safety for women, because she is right that it is a big issue that we've done a lot of work around. The council supported the White Ribbon campaign to tackle violence against women, and it'd be great if that was reflected in the way she suggested.
Thank you. Now we're going to move to item 7, where we're going to be discussing the cost of living. We have a presentation from Chris Hardy, who's the Chief Executive of, he's Foodbank Manager of the S6 Foodbank, who'll give us a short update. Thank you.
Hi everyone, thanks for listening to me for the next 10 minutes. I'm Chris Hardy, I run the Sheffield 6 food banks across Sheffield, so thank you for your time. I'm going to start off with 3 words I'd like you to think of in the next 10 minutes. Those words are time, community and money in people's pockets. They're really important of our core values as the Sheffield 6 food banks. The overview of the Sheffield 6 food banks are: we run 11 sites across Sheffield, and that's up from 4 sites pre-pandemic. We're feeding just under 60,000 people per year across our sites, and that's up from 8,000 people pre-pandemic. Those numbers don't reflect properly the scale really for us, because obviously we've taken on new sites since we started, but we still do believe that our numbers are increasing by 30% year on year. And we expect that number to probably increase a little more this year, as of already we're seeing massive growth in the summer, with pre-October, pre-winter. Our sites are based in community, and we are all community-led. We make sure that our communities are running our projects with food banks behind them. So it's really important that the community leads that project and knows that community a lot better than I could ever run that community. And actually we just support them with food and infrastructure, which is key and critical. And in that's where our strength is. So whether it's our Sharrow community in Shipshape, whether it's our community in Parson Cross, or whether it's our community in Woodhouse, that it's really important that they are controlling their food banks, because they know exactly what that community needs. The needs of our food bank is very diverse. I'll come on to the reasons why people are using food banks in a short while. And we are just starting work on our data and actually deep diving into our data, because I really believe that certain parts of Sheffield have different problems from other parts of Sheffield, and at the moment we're trying to get the information together, which will be over the next 6 months, so that we can feed back to you guys actually what is actually happening in our communities and how we can support our communities the best. Regarding stock, we obviously work on a non-perishable food structure of food. At the present time, we are using 500 tonnes of food a year. We are buying 70% of that in, which is logistically challenging at present with the supermarkets and wars that are going off around the world. Is causing us to think out of the box about how we get the 70% of food in. We also get 30% in through donations, through some of you guys, the community community donations for us on a Saturday morning, which are really extremely important to me and the food banks, because actually they're our gold, and that's where we all connect with community, which is really important to us. The community collections are what blesses me more than anything. We also collect food from supermarkets, businesses, churches, anybody who will donate food to us. I'm quite happy to go and get it from them. We more and more are focusing on big business, and that is for food as well as volunteer hours for people to come in to see us. But again, the scale we are now, we just need food. We just need food in. We need to buy food in. The problem we've got, a problem with stock, is that our numbers are already 30% up on last year. So we've got a 30% increase on demand in July. Plus, at the moment, we believe it's about 15% increase on the cost of the food. So, and we think that is going to increase in the next 2 weeks, actually, to about 20%. We reckon there's another increase coming in. I had a phone call with somebody today. What I really want to talk about is people's journeys and what a person's journey is, about what it looks like when they come into our food banks, and what people are telling us on when they come in. I wrote some words down that have been used. I never quote any story that's over a week old. That's just because I can't remember them. But actually, we need to be thinking about where people are right now. The 5 words I heard on Tuesday were shame, isolation, mental health, anger, and frustration. That's what people come into our food banks feeling, thinking, and have got on themselves. As a food bank, we offer food, we offer friendship and a place to be able to chat, and a non-judgmental atmosphere. We offer trust, so we build people's trust so that they are then able to seek help by one of our advisors who are there. So it's a process that comes through. I'll share a quick story on that. I'm not going to read it down, but we have a lady who's got real severe anxiety, so she'd been with for 5 weeks. It took her 3 weeks to even step through the door. So for 3 weeks she was stood outside, and 2 of our volunteers went and stood with her for 10 minutes and just chatted with her and gave her a cup of coffee. On the 4th week, she came and sat just inside our doorway because she couldn't go any further than that. 2 of our volunteers again spoke to her for 1 hour, just to chat about what was going on in her life. She was desperate to see the assistant advice worker at our site. So we arranged that she came in out of hours through a different entrance, so because she couldn't pass people. So the process of some people coming to our food banks are not easy, and they take time to work through and solve. She saw the CAB, and she's now getting help out of her issues. We feel that people are pushed into poverty, especially since the £20 uptake on universal credit, and I know there is some money come through the council for other income streams in, but that was a big hit for us and a big hit for our people who come into our food banks. That £20 was a complete lifeline. I shared a story 5 minutes ago that obviously I'm based in Hillsborough, we've got sites all over, but somebody walked from the Hillsborough on Infirmary Road to the Morrisons at Hillsborough to save 5p. And that is not the first time I've heard that story. So people are literally, and that is exhausting for any of us who's budgeting to within 1 pence of their life. That is exhausting for any of us who would be doing that. That is exhausting. Never mind trying to live and get out of the chaos that sometimes they're in or thriving in. We see more and more, obviously when we set food banks up, the people we used to see were single males or single people in chaos, especially at Hillsborough because of the flats and the geography of that. Definitely over the last 6 months, definitely over the last 12 months, that has definitely moved from singles to more families, and families in work and families not being able to support the cost of living. That is then forcing them into isolation and imprisonment. I will use the word imprisonment on their estates, actually. So what is happening? They can't afford to get off their estates. So because they can't afford to get off their estates, they can't move, and so they're becoming more and more isolated in their communities, which is really difficult. Which then affects their mental health and how they grow as a community and how they grow as families on that estate, because they can't afford to go into the town centre, they can't afford to go to the swimming baths, they can't afford to go and do just social outlets with the kids, which is a real challenge and will become even more of a challenge in October. We run a phone line, so people who use our food bank has got to phone our phone line. Unless you're an agency, we also have agencies that come through to us. Our phone line is 60% is self-referral, 40% of our referrals are through a phone line. We take 700 phone calls a week on our phone line, and that is because there's a few reasons we carry on with our phone line and don't just use the agencies. That is because we don't want to miss anybody in need in Sheffield. We also see more and more families coming to see us who don't know the benefit system. They've never had to use a food bank before. They've never been in crisis before. So our number is the first place that they are able to get help from. And we try to help people as quickly as possible out of their where they are. The other reason we keep with the referral line is two reasons. Is people walk to the food bank or walk. We try to set a food bank within a mile of each other, of communities, so people walk to them food banks and have to carry the food home. We believe that community is best, so actually people supported in their community, community helping community, is a fundamental that's at our heart. But also we also realise that some people don't want to go to a food bank in their community because of the shame it is and the shame that's around people using food banks in their community. So again, we see more and more in that, and we are open to people coming to different food banks across the city to get help in that. The cost of living crisis is affecting us all, but especially people who are on prepayment meters, who have got debt. They are more harshly treated, or their cost of living has gone up a lot more than somebody who pays by direct debit. That's just a reality. So again, it's how we work with utility companies to help them with the gas and electric bills that are coming in, especially when they're on a prepayment meter, and make sure they're not self-disconnecting away from their houses, and actually they can support. We see more and more people already in this weather living in one room, not using their full house, which will then have a problem with housing stock, with maintenance of properties going forward. They're already in July living in one room. That is going to increase significantly coming up. We're giving more and more code bags out because people can't afford to do any gas or electric. I'll wrap up quickly. We already purchased 5 citizen advice workers coming to 5 of our sites to see if that works. If that does work, then we will roll it out to our other 6 sites. At the moment, that is working. They're coming in to help make sure that people are on the right benefits. I know I've got the uptake of the right benefits. We also have debt workers in there. We're partnering with housing, and we've just started partnering with Green Doctor and NEA regarding people's bills and utility bills coming up in the near future, to see what contracts they're on, if they can get a better deal to stop them self-disconnecting, which is going to be a serious issue come the winter. We are deep diving into all our data, again, to make sure we can work out what is happening to that person who's coming through our door in whichever site that is. And we are offering the best services in each one of our 11 sites. That it's just not a shotgun approach about doing services in the city. We are trying to work out what is happening at each one food bank, so we can make sure that each food bank is supporting the families the best they can. My last thing I will say is we are supporting lots of people who are volunteering at our food bank. One of our food banks is run by people with lived experience, so they are actually running the food bank. More and more we have got more and more people with lived experience working at our food banks, and they are making our food banks, they are running our food banks and changing our culture of our food banks. And I would not underestimate, actually for all of us, we shouldn't be doing to people and saying this is what the communities need. We should be letting the communities and people with lived experience tell us, as somebody who's got lived experience, what actually makes a difference in their community, not presume. We presume for too long. We need them to really move forward and mould us, not us mould them. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you very much. Now we have Helen Sims, who's the Chief Executive of Voluntary Action Sheffield, who'll do another short update. Thank you.
Hi, thank you, and thank you to Chris for, I think, describing the pandemic, actually, that we face around the cost of living crisis. The figures that he's quoted there, the 60,000 regular users of emergency food services from 8,000 pre-pandemic, that's probably the tip of the iceberg. So I'm Helen Sims, I work with Voluntary Action Sheffield, and we work with voluntary community organisations across the city. And we're aware that there are a lot of food provider organisations going on. The work Chris does is incredibly organised and collaborative, but there's lots of informal emergency food provision happening, particularly in minoritised communities, that we're going to work with the Foodbank network over the next few months to identify and map. And I think that's something for this committee to really think about, what's happening locally and what's out there. And one of the things I want to talk about just very quickly is that as a city we've come together and we are treating this as a crisis, and we've brought together a cost of living crisis action plan and a strategy group. We had our second meeting this morning. That group is made up of representatives from across sectors, so there are business representatives, the council are there, it's chaired by Councillor Terry Fox, voluntary sector, citizens advice are there, they're absolutely key to this. To work collaboratively to look at what we can do both now to serve that emergency need, but we are looking at the horizon, and come the autumn, when caps are taken off, energy prices go up, we are anticipating a lot more poverty, and as Chris was describing, people that have never been in this position before and have no idea about how to access the benefits system and the support that's there. So we're really ramping up what we're doing and working collaboratively to make sure that we pool our efforts and our capacity. So just in outline, that action plan has key themes. So communications and information sharing is absolutely critical in this, and I think locally it would, if we were to do some sort of mapping, and Vaz would be quite happy to support that in the work we're doing around supporting the food banks, it would be great to get something that's very localised where people can access information. There are obviously citywide services like citizens advice and shelter that can give support and have very well established mechanisms and very inclusive services that they can offer, but there's a lot going on locally, and it'd be great to be able to signpost people to what's around them. We've worked with the council on a website called Money Support at sheffieldmoneysupport.co.uk, which is all of the VCS offer, and we're slowly populating that site, and it's a searchable site, so you can search by where you are or a particular theme, and we hope that will be useful in doing some of that work, but we'd be really interested in obviously looking at what's happening in this particular area. There's also another website I want to mention, which is called worryingaboutmoney.co.uk, which is excellent. It's a step-by-step going through questions website that guides the user through to the right support. So I just wanted to mention that here. I will share all of the information we have. I've done a one-pager on all of the key kind of reference points, so we can circulate that after this. But just to touch on the other themes of the action plan, communications and information is a key thing. Obviously, direct and indirect access to emergency support is something we want to collaborate on, and working with the food banks, and there is a city food access plan, which is about that emergency provision, but it's also about things like community cafes. So at Zest in this local area, there is a community cafe where you can get a really good hot meal on a pay-as-you-feel basis. Things like that we really want to develop, and those models are very inclusive. They take away the feelings of shame that Chris was referencing. There are other models of delivering support that we need to implement. One thing I would say about this is that we need community spaces to offer these services from, and I think it's really important that we identify those spaces in our communities so we can think about where we might need to invest and open up spaces that may still be closed since the pandemic. The other areas we're looking at, obviously, are support for people to move away from crisis. Chris was talking about how vital it is to have advice in his services, but helping people move away from that crisis position and supporting them with their financial sustainability is key, and we've got lots of services, both in the council and the voluntary sector, that do that. We're looking at the data and intelligence, so trying to understand the picture better. I think that we've both referenced, people that have never been in poverty before. We need to understand what their needs are and think about how we support them. The role of landlords in poverty and cost of living, private landlords in particular, is a massive issue. People are living in really poorly insulated, poorly heated homes, and that's a massive issue for us as a city. Employers have a massive role in this as well. This is about what employers can do, obviously, to make sure the cost of living is reflected in any pay increases, but there are other things employers can do, so we're engaging with employers. And there are lots of specific needs for different groups, people with disabilities. Chris referenced the isolation. It's a massive issue. Transport is a massive issue. People can't afford to get to things that might be suitable, might be what they want to do. So we're working as a group. They're the key themes, and I think it would be really good to just work with this local area to look at what's available locally and make sure everybody knows and is aware of that. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Helen. We look forward to working with you. I'd like in this space to just welcome as well that we have people from the Central Youth Council here, so thank you very much for being here. And we look forward to working with you as well over the years to come. Thank you. So our next item, item 8, is from Matt Reynolds, who's going to talk to us about about transport plans and where we are at the moment with the issue that Veronica Hardstaff brought up earlier. Thank you. So as I say, we've got 10 minutes, so we'll then move 10 or 15 minutes, yes.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Can everyone hear me okay? Yeah, good. Right, so first of all, good afternoon, everybody. It's good to be here. One thing which we try to do in the Transport Department is speak to members of the public. Obviously, you have good things to say. You also have bad things to say, and I think it's trying to find what that balance looks like and understanding, obviously, where we're coming from and the justifications to what we're doing and why we're doing it. So, next slide, please. Thank you very much. So today, I'm going to probably have to go through, because I kind of rush this through, really, because we've not got too much time. But the first thing I wanted to go through was some of the challenges and opportunities we've got. A little bit of an understanding about where our funding comes from and what that essentially means we can do with the funding that we have and what we essentially deliver on the highway network. A quick rundown of some of our projects, both live and future, the ones we've got in the pipeline. And then obviously we'll touch on the speed indicator displays as what's been mentioned just before in some of the catch-up from the minutes from last time. So next slide, please. So in terms of the state of play, I think it's important just to recognise now that we are in quite a funny position in the way people have responded back from the pandemic. So car traffic is now above pre-COVID levels. It's slightly different in the fact that we don't really have the peaks anymore, or as we used to see them. So the morning peak is nowhere near like what we know it as, but the evening peak is longer and more drawn out and kind of much more kind of focused on specific areas. So that's changing the way how people are working. It's changing the way people are kind of interacting probably on the school run. But it's also meaning route choice is also slightly differently. So we're trying to manage a network which is incredibly unstable at the moment. And that's causing all sorts of issues. In terms of public transport use, I think this is also a really important point. We're up to about 70%. So we're nowhere near the commercial level of what the bus operators were previously operating on. Now that's a problem because some of you will know, some of you might not know, but buses aren't in public operation. They are private companies. They will do what private companies do. And in most circumstances, if you aren't making any money, you cut your services. And that is what we expect is going to happen. You've seen it in the news about the demon over the hill around what's going to happen in October when this funding runs out for bus services. And that is something which is critically important for us, for all the matters which were just raised by my colleagues previously, but also from every single other reason why people want to travel. It is going to be a problem. As the local authority, we are not actually the transport authority. It is a company, it is an organisation called the Mayo Combined Authority. Oliver Coppard is the mayor of that authority, and they have the statutory responsibility for transport provision. But clearly it's important for us as local authorities to try and manage and coordinate that together. So there is long, protracted conversations going on about how we can try to maintain that bus operation, how we can maintain that public transport network to anything like what we think it needs to have a functional working economy. Rail recovery is about, it's a bit different structurally. It's set up completely differently to bus operations. It's a franchise model with a lot of government support which sits behind it. We're currently looking at about 50% of there. Rail in South Yorkshire is not a huge mode of transport because there's not an extensive railway network. There are bits which feed into the city, but generally speaking it's not like Manchester or Leeds, for example, so it's very different. The other thing I just wanted to say to the state of play is that funding for transport has completely shifted from what you would previously expect. So, funding new roads doesn't happen. We are in a position where government policy, regional policy from all directions is saying we have to break the back of car use. It's not sustainable, it's not the way forward, it needs to change, and this is where all our funding comes from. It is interventions which look to see how we can start changing that behaviour for various reasons: public health reasons, environmental reasons, accessible reasons, socio-inclusion reasons. There are a lot of reasons why the push is towards active travel and public transport, and that's where we are as a local authority. That's where we need to be. There is also a huge focus on carbon. Everyone knows what the net carbon agenda is all about, and obviously we need to balance that against the need to get people into jobs, into education, into training, so it has that economic dimension to it as well. But that, for the first time, certainly in my experience, is now starting to take that back step. Previously it was always about jobs, always about the economy. Now it's a much more rounded discussion around how you can provide for better use of resources, etc. I mentioned SYPT, the Mayoral Combined Authority. Some of you might recall them as being SYPTE. I just thought I'd mention at this point there's been a rebrand. So SYPTE, the people you used to get your bus passes from and everything else, is now Mayoral Combined Authority. They've gone through a rebrand and they've kind of brought those two organisations together. And just layer on that point which I made before, the COVID-19 bus funding is ending in October, and that's where this cliff edge is. So right the way through the pandemic, bus operators have been given money direct from the DfT to basically run bus services. That finishes in October, and that's where we're starting to find these big gaps, because the bus operators will, their commercial companies, as I said, they will run what makes the money, and if that doesn't happen, then we have to try and find the solution to that. Next slide, please. There's quite a lot on here, but in terms of the challenges and the opportunities, I thought I'd just kind of express the kind of, how many requests and whatever we get in through the service. So we get about 13,000 requests a year. 13,000 a year for things like crossings, for things like WL lines, stuff like that. It's absolutely massive. Now, we go through a sifting exercise. Some of them come through the LAC, and we're working through how we can work more closely with elected members here today to understand how we can do some sort of some localised prioritisation of them, because that's critical. Some are good ideas, fantastic. Some are a little bit balmy. We have had some ideas for sort of cable cars and things like that, and kind of big segregated monorails and stuff like that. That would be great, but unrealistic. So we do get some good ideas, and we act on them. And we use them into inclusions of where we're doing our big strategic interventions. So, for example, we've been asked to do 20-mile-an-hour zones in certain places. They might not fit with our prioritisation, but if we're doing something in the area, we'll stick it in. And I think this is where I've got the real opportunity to work with the LACs today, who will then work with you, and I'll work with you, to try to look how we can get these kind of smaller schemes which don't make sense on their own, because we wouldn't get the funding for, but on a bigger picture, they completely make sense, and that's where we were trying to get to with some of the work we're doing with the members. We are looking at what's that, central LAC? Oh yeah, so the central LAC in itself has hundreds of requests, and obviously we work with everyone to prioritise them. Next slide, please. Right, I can't read that. I don't know why I put it in font that small. the local transport plan, I think, is what it says. That's our kind of bread and butter funding. And we have things like local safety schemes, which are done on a prioritised basis. We've got 20 mile an hour in there. We've got crossings and things like that. That is the kind of day-to-day stuff which we do kind of year on year. We have a rolling programme for them, and they're done on a prioritised basis. We've also introduced a road safety fund, which was kind of a one-off win, really. It was £4 million, and it's going into kind of road safety, as the fund suggests, road safety initiatives, improving accessibility. We're looking to accelerate some of those programmes on the LTP as part of that. School 20 mile an hours are going in, as well as some residential 20 mile an hour zones. And we're also looking at the speed indicator displays, which are working with the LAC, have also come through that funding. We've got active travel funding, which is specific for active travel initiatives. And then we have major strategic and strategic type schemes. So the Connecting Sheffield programme is all part of that. I'll get on to that in a second. But also things like big road investment, which we previously went through that channel. As I said, that doesn't really happen anymore. But that's the kind of schemes which would come through those major interventions. Next slide, please. So these are live projects just in the central area. So in terms of the local transport plan, integrated transport block, it's a mouthful. It's actually changed its name to something even more ridiculous than that, but I can't remember it. But we're putting in a new crossing, or looking at the crossing of Sheaf Street. So as you come out the station, it's the one to the right-hand side as you're coming out, so it's going towards the bus interchange. There's loads of accidents there. I've got my personal kind of ideas about why that's happening, but essentially there's something which needs to be looked at there. So there's probably more detection that needs to go in to keep the red lights at red while people try to get through the last phase of the crossings. I think that's what's happening. We're looking at redoing the signals on Western Bank, so the new crossing at the university between the two campuses. I don't know if you know it. It really needs an overhead signal, because if you get a high side of vehicle, you can't see the lights, and that's a danger. So we're looking to see what we can do about that. It's called a mast arm. Harcourt Road, Crooks Valley Road, Oxford Road. This is accidents around that zebra crossing on Crooksmore Road. It's come up as the 7th highest area in the city for accidents, and it's primarily cyclists and pedestrians which are being struck. And it's during the daytime, so there's no, it's not as if it's happening at night. I think it's just a bit of a misunderstanding of what's going on. So we need to have a look to see what's happening in that area, and we'll come up with a solution. I won't go through all of these. I'll have to just pick out some. Pavement parking ban. If anyone's noticed, we are now implementing a pavement parking ban within the city centre. For those which don't know, pavement parking is not an offence outside of London unless you are causing obstruction of highway, and that's challengeable by the police. So it's a Highway Act contravention, not anything we can enforce as a local authority. But in London, obviously they can. But what we can do with this, we can set up a specific traffic regulation order which marks that area out as a restriction. And that's what's happening. Now, if we were to do that across the city, it would cost millions, just in signage alone, because everything has to be signed. If you've not got the sign right, you can't enforce against it. That means you can't take it through the courts or anything, and you get challenged back. It makes it pretty much useless. So the signing has got to be absolutely perfect, and that's what costs a lot of the money. So in the city centre, we've done a wide area, but we're putting it in focused areas, and if that seems to work and it gets the deliverables which we want it to, then we can then start to roll that out. And if it starts to work really well, then that's when we can start taking it out into some of the communities where we do have issues with pavement parking. It's a major problem. It's always been a problem, and we've been asking for these powers similar to London for a very long time. Clark House Road will be a crossing just out here, actually. Just the kind of, well, there. For those online, you can't see where I'm pointing, but it's Clark House Road. And that's going to be a zebra crossing, which I'm sure will be fantastic for the school, and obviously a lot of the people travelling up towards the hospital and the university and everywhere else. Netherthorpe Road, there is a subway underneath, awful, and I'm glad you're putting in the initiatives around kind of women's protection, because that's one of the issues we have at subways, is that they are very horrible places to be if you're on your own at night. So what we do with Netherthorpe Road, we're looking to put new lighting in there, revamp it, make the entrance, which is very enclosed, wider, more open, just trying to create that natural level of surveillance. So that'll be a good initiative to go in. City Centre Cycle Hub is progressing. We're now moving to the next the fit out stage. So that will be if you remember where the old Grosvenor Hotel was in the city centre on Charter Square, where the new HSBC is building, it's going to be on that kind of bank of shops underneath where the big BT office was. So that's going to be good. That's going to be a nice a place where people can park their bikes and start using a lot of the infrastructure. Road Safety Fund is also looking at Burton Street. So in Hillsborough, where the Burton Street Foundation is, we acknowledge there's a need to get between the campuses, and there'll be in fact it's currently just gone through its traffic regulation order process with no objections, which is fantastic. So we can press on with that one for design and delivery, which would be great to see that one get in. Wanted per ward. So this is a speed indicator display or vehicle activated sign. We've worked with Martin's just sent us through in today. But we're working with each ward to determine 6 locations, and this will be a little sign which goes around, and it'll determine when someone's speeding. It'll flash up to say slow down or refresh the speed limit. But the most important thing for me from all of that is the data it collects, so we can start using that as a way to acknowledge where we think we're getting regular breaches in speeding, etc., etc. So there's going to be a really good evidence base for us to use. Active travel funds. So we've got the Sheaf Valley Cycle Route, which just goes through the city ward around Shoreham Street. You'd have seen we're receiving a bit of bad press on that one with people cutting down the barriers and causing all sorts of mischief down there with vandalism. That again is a trial route. But we can't do the trial if they keep getting broken, because we can't get the relevant data out of there to determine whether, what we need to determine from it. It's a cycle route which has been determined based on the evidence. This is where the evidence is shown where people want to cycle. Both sides of the route, you've got Adeel Road, which is heavily trafficked and high traffic with big vehicles on it. Not ideal. Chesterfield Road is like the same. So this logically is the place in the middle. And this is where we're looking to prioritise that active travel route. And again, it's something which we can't really judge it on day one, because this is a piece of infrastructure which is going to be there for hopefully decades. And 20 years' time, that's when we want to judge it, when we've started to work through, when we've started to get that behavioural change, because these things don't happen overnight. It takes a very, very long time. Active neighbourhoods in Crooks and Walkley. I'll take the ladies' point. It's a huge change in Crooks and Walkley, let's be honest, it's massive. And I don't for 1 minute kind of want to disregard anyone's position on that, because it's huge, it's big, and I fully appreciate everyone's position on it. But one thing where we need, as I said before, we need to try and break this almost obsession with using the car to do very short trips. And what we have in Crooks and Walkley are very strong local centres, which we do see short hop of trips getting the car to go to. But then on the other side of that, there's very close to town and to the universities and the hospitals. Again, very short trips are applied there. And for 1 minute, I'm not saying that everybody jumps on a bike or everybody walks. It's not about that. It's the people which can do it. We need to try and provide them the opportunities to give them the infrastructure, empower them enough to make sure that they feel they can do it. And the active neighbourhood is one way in which we can do it. There's a whole raft of tools in which we can try to change behaviour. We could put a segregated cycle route through there, but that would probably even mean removing all the parking on one side of the road. Again, I don't think that's the most appropriate solution. But it is a trial. We're working through it. We're working very well with the local members. So the members from Walkley here tonight have been very good. We've got some sessions next Tuesday in the afternoon, 2 till 4:30 at St Mary's Church. And then we've got another one the following Tuesday in the evening between 6 and 8 at the Ebenezer, at the Walk Ebenezer. So, I'd love to come and talk to you about that in more detail outside of this forum. I also don't think we get it right first time, because these are experimental orders, and it allows us to play around with what those restrictions are. That's why they're experimental, that's why they're in. But from our perspective, Crooks is absolutely plagued with through traffic. Before this went in, again, I appreciate the lady's position, and if any of you also hold that position in the room tonight, but we have reams and reams of emails saying there's too much traffic on my street in Crooks, there's too much speeding, there's going to be an accident here, and this is what the scheme is ultimately aiming to do. I'm going to point to Douglas and the Kelham Island and Ruth and Martin, because we had a similar thing with Kelham Island, didn't we, when we put the low traffic neighbourhood down in Kelham Island. Initial really strong kickback, wasn't it? And now it's completely changed now. That this is why it's in for 6 months, to give it that opportunity, to give it that change. But it's an open discussion, and we're more than willing to work with you on that. But one thing which I will just say is that we just need to give this a little bit of time and let it bed in. School streets is another part. It's actually where I've got School Street going in Crooks and Walkley at Westways, which again is being really well received by the school, and I'd love to get some feedback specifically from the parents which are using that. But we've also got School Streets going in at Hunters Bar Primary as well. Again, trying to break that cycle of parents dropping the kids off to school. And again, I see it. I'm a dad. I've got 3 kids at primary school, and I've got neighbours which live 2 minutes away in the car. It's 5 minutes walk, and they're driving the kids to school. And it's that behaviour, it's that deep-rooted behaviour we really need to try and change, because we've got to teach the next generation that this is the way you need to travel. Connecting Sheffield, then, I'm really aware. Sorry, Chair, that I'm going over. Kelham Island and Neeps End, we've got a big programme of work going on down there. Bus priority, kind of improving the crossings, improving the way the area feels down in Kelham Island and Neeps End through greenery, etc., etc. The city centre, well, there's a lot of revitalisation work going around there through regeneration anyway. We've got some big projects in there to try and make that public space more usable. And then the Nether Edge scheme, which you might have missed, but it actually does come into this LAC area. It goes up through City and your ward, Andrew, as well, doesn't it? So it goes up towards, so it comes from Nether Edge and it goes up towards the museum and the universities. Again, that very strong link of where people are wanting to travel to. Next slide, please. So the future projects, we're committed to local transport plan funding now, so we'll do more of those smaller schemes I was talking about next year. But we're also looking to put some more monitoring in for some of these, for the new active neighbourhoods. So what I'm saying is that if we get to that 6-month period and these schemes look like they need changing or we need to do a bit more work, then we've got the budget already outlined in there. If we realise that actually the School Street is working really well, then we'll then move to see what we can do on making that one work. The other mouthful, you'll realise in transport we absolutely love acronyms, but this is CRSTS, this is the City Region Sustainable Transport Fund, Settlement, sorry, and within there, so that should say Penistone Road, it says Penistone Street. A61 Penistone Road, we'll be looking to see how we can improve the bus priority from basically Shalesmoor roundabout up into Hillsborough and then beyond. And we'll be obviously linking in with the tram to see how we can work out all the detection, etc. We've also got potential, that potential bus service improvement plan outcomes is basically us saying that we're still going to work with the Department for Levelling Up. Now we were unsuccessful with the bus service improvement plan, but we are engaging with discussions with the Department for Transport and the Department for Levelling Up specifically on how we can get more improvements to localise bus services, including things like demand responsive transport as well. We've got the Active Travel Fund 4 coming through. We don't know what that looks like. We don't know the guidance. It hasn't been scoped, but we know that's coming, so that's something we'll be looking forward to. And then we've also got Shalesmoor Gateway, which is a remodel of Shalesmoor roundabout, and that's going through the Department for Transport at the moment. It's a blended scheme. It includes active travel improvements as well as bus priority, and it also looks to rejig and realign some of the existing highway alignments through that junction. Next slide, please. And that's tram lines. So I don't know why that's in there. It's probably because it's Hillsborough Park. I just searched Hillsborough Park images and that one came up. So that's it.
Thank you very much. Well, this is an incredibly challenging and exciting area to be working in. I think the speakers we've had today have, they've highlighted that. Adeel has just reminded me that we need to have a show of hands if we support the spend presented in Adeel's presentation. And Jay needs to record this. Hmm? Can you explain? With the amended wording. Can we? Is it clear what we're doing, Tom? Yeah. So can we have a show of hands of this is the councillors. So show of hands, please. Yeah.
Are you going to get the wording together afterwards? Yes. Yeah. We'll change the wording.
Okay. Okay.
Can I make an observation?
Yeah.
We're being talked at a lot, but we're not getting any chance to contribute. And I don't see what the point of me sitting here is. Yeah. I'd like to make one point. We've got what can we do to increase consultation. Yeah. The lady sitting here was saying there'd been no consultation with Walkley Forum on some of the issues. And I think there is a feeling, I think a lot of this is excellent. But the problem is, if communities aren't consulted at the outset, they will break the pots and everything else because they don't feel ownership. And everybody I've spoken to in Nether Edge and at Walkley and Crooks says this feels like it's been imposed top down.
I think that this is the very issue that we'd like to go into the breakout groups to discuss. So
just a lesson. Always start with the community and then they'll buy into the schemes. But when they're just imposed on them and they're faced with them and they can't get the disabled and they can't park at the doctor's surgery and they can't park at the pharmacy, they're not going to buy into it.
So if you can make that clear in your breakout group, Tom. Matthew first.
I completely take your point, absolutely. I think one thing which I would just say is that when we're devising these schemes, we were in and out of lockdowns all the time, and it was incredibly difficult to do. Now, one thing which I've taken back kind of, to the team specifically is saying if we're doing this again, it needs to be a situation like this where, you have the plans on, and you get your post-it notes out and we draw on it. And that's what we'll be looking to do at these workshops here, next Tuesday and the Tuesday after. And we had to do a lot of it online, and it was really challenging. Obviously, that participation online is very different to what it would be in person. But yeah, I completely get it. I think the other thing is what we've learned as well is actually being really clear on the justification, why we're doing it. Now, the imposing bit, we are implementing these under experimental order, which always naturally feels like it's being imposed. Now,
it's okay, you don't have to defend yourself.
Oh yeah, I know. I'm just.
I don't have to drag it on.
Yeah. Okay.
Please start with the community.
Points taken. Yeah.
Okay, can I just get Tom to have your chance to speak and we're going to the breakout groups.
Chair. Yeah. Before we go into the breakout rooms, groups, we're not online. I just wanted to make a comment on the three presentations, and thank you for the three of them, especially the work that Helen and Chris are doing. Now, the work of a local area committee, it says in the kind of constitution, is shaped by residents' priorities. And I think if you asked me in the 2 months since I've been elected, if you looked at my inbox, what are people talking about? They're largely talking to me about what Matt's been presenting this evening. They're not talking to me about what Helen and Chris have raised. And two words that Chris highlighted, shame and isolation, I think sit behind why people aren't getting in touch with the council. And that's why Ben and I push for the cost of living to be added as one of the themes for spending for this committee, because we know that the need is out there, and I think it would be really, really good if a future meeting of this committee was focused on the cost of living as a theme, and there was a chance to talk about some of the issues that we were all aware of that are really hard to talk about because there is that shame and stigma attached to them. But this is a social emergency, let's have no doubt about it, and I welcome the group that's been set up by the council to bring together a range of partners, and we've all got a role to play in making sure that is tackling the right kind of issues, from getting food out to people, but also, as Helen said, to providing warm spaces. Warm spaces. This is the situation that we're about to face come the autumn, where people can go to be heated, and we're very clear that this has to be up front and centre, top priority for the City Council. And so I think, I'd really welcome the work that we've heard today, and would welcome the fact that we have that as a theme for future discussion at these meetings.
Thank you, Tom. Can we now go into the breakout groups?
Question.
Oh, sorry, Alan.
Can I just make a comment? I've got every sympathy with you, because I used to be a planner in the 90s, and I worked on the Unitary Development Plan, which was the biggest consultation, and we had very, very poor consultation. And then we were hit by national policies, which changed the very basis of the plan. This is exactly what's going to happen now. The bus crisis, which I must admit I didn't realise was as close as October, but I checked into it, it's 40% of the services will almost certainly close. 40% of the services. Now you think of that, 4-0. You then look at the policies that we're putting forward now. People are going to go into their cars. And unfortunately, the City Council, Sheffield City Council, the Mayor, the newly elected Mayor, they've all said that they haven't got the money to put into the buses. The Conservative government is not in a million years going to put any levelling up money into South Yorkshire for buses. So whether we like it or not, we're going to have at least a 40% reduction in buses for the foreseeable future. And that, I think, from a policy point of view, sorry to do this, means that you're going to have to deal with that reality, which is going to change some of the realities of what you talked about tonight, which isn't easy to talk about. Because I support cycling and walking and all the other initiatives. We live in near Hunter's Bar, so for God's sake, we know all the problems. But we've got to recognise that buses, although we might like them, and I remember the 2p buses of the 80s, they ain't the solution anymore. They ain't going to be a solution for the next decade until you possibly get a Labour government, and even then, maybe not.
Could you stand up, please? Yeah.
Thank you. I think it's worth remembering from what Councillor Hunt has just said, that there are a lot of poor people and they don't have cars. They can't run cars, they can't afford them, and they can't afford the petrol. And actually, I'm a car user myself, and I'm trying not to use it because I fundamentally take on board everything that Matt said about it. And it does take time to get used to it, and you do have to rethink how it works. But I also think in this committee, to spend time worrying about car drivers should not be your priority. How you keep the streets usable for everybody, and that includes children and older people and everything else in between, is one thing. But car drivers, we've got to stop prioritising them. They ruin this city and many other ones as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Could we therefore go into the breakout groups? We're going to be considering two questions here. One, what can we do to increase engagement and consultation with the communities in this LAC area? And two, what projects would you like the money to be spent on under each theme?
25 minutes.
Yeah, and we've got 25 minutes. Yeah. In my small group, we're really great, so and innovative, so it's working. So please come back and we'll reconvene and hear the questions. Is that all right? Okay, thank you very much. That was a very enjoyable time. I think I saw lots of people enjoying contributing to ideas for this organisation. So first, could we therefore have the questions that were submitted to this group before the meeting? And I understand that Andy Chaplin had some questions. So could we hear your questions, Andy?
Right, excuse me if I read this because this is a blended question from a number of people. So it's basically about tram lines in Hillsborough Park, and there are several questions and a bit of an introduction. So the fences have gone up this week in Hillsborough Park for tram lines. Access will now be restricted and much of the park will be inaccessible until around the 30th of July. Some people may know, over the past 6 weeks or so, the local Hillsborough community has been disappointed and concerned about how tram lines intend to proceed this year. The Hillsborough Forum is currently meeting tonight and discussing this issue to determine what further actions can be taken. So questions are, why have our local councillors appeared to have been so powerless in securing better arrangements for the local community? Why have local and council officers appeared to issue statements in support of tram lines showing no awareness of the issues? And why are Hillsborough residents and businesses not considered a vital voice in the arrangements that apply to tram lines and for other potential events? Basically, the background is that nearby businesses struggle for 3 weeks as people do not visit the park, and they have a bad 3 days during the event. And specifically, the no leave and re-entry option that tramlines have adopted for festival goers cuts off their custom. Non-festival goers stay away, responding to the signs now telling them to expect long delays on the roads in the area. Will the central LAC help the campaign to reinstate the previous leave and re-enter options at the festival? Re-entry at least allows some benefit to local businesses, even if they still have a poor trading weekend. It is also massively important for many local people who will be attending. It is some compensation for the extreme noise and disruption and allows residents to check on their property, allows childcare to be managed and covers situations where people are acting as carers and more. Will the central LAC help local traders who lose out during the event weekend? For example, the LAC could fund, in inverted commas, local businesses are open and accessible, please support them signage, instead of just the current stay away from the area signage, and by supporting a request for an agreed limit on big events in Hillsborough Park in the future. And that's on behalf of a group of Hillsborough businesses and local residents.
Thank you very much for your question. Will Councillor Nottage from Hillsborough answer, please?
Thanks a lot for your question, Andy. Whilst I can't answer the second half of those questions, if you like, on behalf of the LAC as a committee, I would like to say something on behalf of the local councillors, myself, Christine Gilligan and George Lindars Hammond. Christine and George aren't with us because they're at the Hillsborough Forum, and I'm the newest of the three, so forgive me if I'm a bit green, if you pardon the pun. In terms of why were the local councillors so sort of powerless to give a voice to the local people, which is our job, I have found that very personally frustrating. We are getting better in terms of getting closer to getting some answers, but we haven't managed to achieve a substantial change in the policy from the organisers for this year. We will be organising or convening a meeting in Hillsborough Ward after the event to engage better with the local community, bring everyone together and find out how we can put some better restrictions on it going forward to address all of those issues In terms of the re-entry policy, this was something I first raised with them at the drop-in session for last year's event, and was told that it was because of COVID. And there's definitely been scope creep with the event since it moved to Hillsborough Park, and there's been massive scope creep since it was a council-run event, where it benefited all the businesses that were involved massively, and increasingly it looks like the funds are concentrated into fewer and fewer hands, and I fully agree that this is something that we need to do something about. And you know, you have the full support of the three of us on this. In terms of the statement that went out into the press that responded to the petition put forward by local residents before any of the councillors had an answer, we have got a meeting coming up with some officers, and we will hope to get back to you. But again, sorry, I haven't got an answer for you yet. And as much as that's sort of half an answer, that's what I've got. Would anyone else like to add anything?
Brian.
Yeah. Could I say that I think if any funding is going to go for signage, it ought to come from tram lines. Right, I can't really get any closer. I was going to say, if there is going to be any funding that goes towards signage, that should come from tram lines.
Right. And can we move on from that item?
Could I just add one more thing, Bernard? One thing that is of relevance to the way tramlines interacts with the local economy. The council has passed a motion recently to support community wealth building across the city in terms of strengthening local businesses, and I think that is of crucial importance to the way we make decisions about tramlines going forward, and also about other events that take place on city land and how they interact with the local economy and how they interact with local residents. So we're also hoping to get a review of the general policy for events including tramlines, not just tramlines specifically.
Adeel.
Thanks, Chair. In regards to the signs, I can speak to my officers and we can look into that tomorrow to explore what we can do and where the funding will come from for that. Thank you.
I know that in Upperthorpe next year they're hoping to have a Peace in the Park as festival, and I know the feedback that I've got from local businesses from that was that they were not benefiting from that festival. So I'm going to be, well, I'm sure we'll be engaging with that, or the organisers, so that the local businesses actually will benefit from that event, because that's what they're meant for. Are there any other questions? Yeah.
Thank you. Sorry, this is all really new to me. Can I just clarify, are you saying that there's not going to be any change in that rule for tramlines this year in terms of the in and out rule? And I love the suggestion tramlines should pay for that. Does that mean that you guys will enforce that at some point in the agreement that we have with tramlines?
Henry, any ideas?
I can't sit here and say 100% we'll be able to force a re-entry policy upon event organisers going forward, but that's what we're aiming for. For this year, we were hoping to get a more substantial shift in their re-entry policy, but all they've done is clarify really that if you have a disability or a medical condition where you need to leave the site, you will be able to arrange that by speaking to somebody inside the festival. It's not really a shift in policy. It's what it was in effect last year during COVID's re-entry policy. So it's not really changed. It's just been clarified, and it was presented in the media as a shift in policy, but they haven't really conceded any ground. We are looking for a more substantial shift for next year's event.
So just to sort of bring this together, I mean, some of the overarching things are about what we learn. It's really important to remember, I mean, there's 12 of us on this committee, but we're not the council. We're only a small part of the council. But also got to recognise that the way these things come about is, we have these overarching policies, but actually all the actions are sort of delegated down through offices. Somewhere, someone must have agreed a contract with Tramlines as organisers and the council to rent that part of the park for that usage. And it is the overall policy over the last few years has been about basically marketising the parks to try and bring in some money just to keep them going. And that's to sort of compensate for all the cuts in funding everywhere. But what we're seeing now is the effect of that. And I think we're seeing that, this is what happened. I have no idea what are the terms of that contract, and I'm sure that, the operators would argue it's commercially secret and it shouldn't be disclosed to members of the public, including us. And, because we've had so many battles with things like that before. So I don't know what they're entitled to do and what they're not, but they are basically a commercial operation. And given that they have secured that site in the park, it's theirs to do what they want with. That's not a good situation from our point of view at all. So the question is, if we learn from this now, then we need to be pushing and saying, well, has this policy on marketing the parks gone too far and actually sold off too much of our rights? Is that a price too far? Is it a cost too far? Because actually there is a real cost to businesses and residents in Hillsborough. And it won't just be Hillsborough Park, it'll be other parks that are sold off or rented off for other events affecting other communities at other times. So we do at some point need to make a sort of political judgment about where we stand on that. I don't know where this is going, but I think it would be useful if we come back to this, ask for a proper analysis after the event of what was the net benefit of Tramlines to the city after this.
Yeah, please.
Unscripted response. I think basically the difference this year is that there is a consensus, I think, around Hillsborough. It's always difficult to say there's consensus, but certainly this year there's a groundswell that says Tramlines is not doing anything for Hillsborough. So it's not doing anything for the businesses that are there, and it's not doing anything much for the residents that are there. And I think this will just not go away now, because there's getting to be a groundswell where there's a continuum between businesses that would quite like people to still have Tramlines there where people come out and they would gain some business. There are businesses that have to shut because nobody comes to Hillsborough when the event's on for the weekend because they can't get near them. And then there are local residents who would, again, probably much rather that the thing disappeared and went to a park that was bigger and could more easily cope with it, because essentially the park becomes unusable for about 2 weeks while it becomes a building site and an events location. So I think Douglas is right. There needs to be a fundamental review about what parks are for and how they're used.
Just before the young people that are leaving, could I just thank you for turning up, and it would be good to work out some more formal arrangement that we meet with you more often. Thank you very much.
What happens to the income derived from Tramlines Festival? If it goes into general council pot and straight wherever, you'll get nothing. If it supports Hillsborough Park, then Hillsborough gets something.
Yeah.
I don't know the answer though. Maybe you do.
Yeah. Welcome with that.
We can take that back.
Yeah, we can take that back. Thank you. So if I've got Ben next, and then Henry.
Thank you. So I guess to directly answer that, I used to be cabinet member of finance, so I know a bit more about how these sorts of things work. The direct income from the contract will support the park's budget overall, which is one of the ways that we've kept parks open, maintained as a council, has been to, as Douglas said, commercialise and have more events put on. There is a benefit to Hillsborough in that, and I know this because I live in Hillsborough, in addition to being a Walkley councillor, but there's been a lot of infrastructure work around the pathways to deal with flooding issues and that. And so the benefit doesn't come through the fee that they pay, it comes through the other conditions that the council impose as part of granting that contract. Like Douglas, the details of the contract, I don't know. Very few people on the council will know, because you can access it if you can demonstrate a need to know. And like Douglas, I don't think I've ever convinced anyone that I've had a good enough reason to need to know. I just want to say more broadly, tramlines for the city is a good thing, and that shouldn't be lost as part of this discussion. I mean, for me, it's not sort of tramlines bad, off you go. It's tramlines is a good thing, how do we make it work better? And as someone who used to engage with them an awful lot when they were on the Ponderosa, it does feel to have a different sort of approach than it did. It doesn't feel like the community-driven, the tram lines I knew on the Ponderosa couldn't do enough for any community group that I'd put in touch with them to make them feel engaged or connected, whether it was, free tickets, which I know they still do, but basically if there was a kid with a guitar that wanted to be on a stage, we could probably make it happen type thing. It'd be a small stage, and depending on how good they were, maybe somewhere a bit out of the way and with the volume turned down, but they'd sort of make that happen, and that ethos seems to have dwindled. And I know for tragic reasons that personalities have changed in the organisation, and whether that's part of it or not, I don't know. But I think, coming back to the point, tramlines is, I think, a good thing. We need to make it work better. To answer your question, will anything change in the next week? Almost certainly not, I would say, because we as 12 can't make that decision. It's other people in other parts of the council that will do that. I know the 3 Hillsborough councillors, and I appreciate Henry sort of bringing George into it as a cross-party thing. I think that's welcome, but they'll certainly make representations to make sure that learning's felt for next year, and if I can sort of feed in from previous experience on the Ponderosa, happy to help you in that way.
Thank you very much. Can all these comments and observations be fed into the Parks Committee on the council so they can mull it over and put more pressure here? Does that seem a reasonable way to take this? Thank you.
Is it formal?
Yeah, make a formal request to Parks Committee. Yeah. Okay. Are there any more questions? Well, thank you very much. It's been a very stimulating evening, and it's been great to see so many people engaged. It would be great to reach more people and from different sectors of our communities. We all keep our eyes and ears open to what's going on, and I hope we can build an organisation here that continues to engage with the real issues that people are facing now, particularly in the light of the credit crunch and all the poverty that we're facing at the moment. It's going to be absolutely crucial for us to work as councillors together and communities where there's goodwill to come up with solutions to these issues that are going to be very challenging. So thank you very much for coming.